Hi, this is Kevin Pettigrew, and this is 3 a.m. Pill Talk. And today we are talking to Melanie Collins.
Good morning.
Good morning. She is a licensed clinical therapist.
Yes, I
So,
am.
so what exactly does that look like? Um what do you specialize in?
So I specialize in neurodivergence, which is ADHD and autism, along with things like some personality disorders. But I kind of focus a little more on the ADHD and autism. I work with polarity, which is the masculine feminine balance in relationships and within yourself, which a lot of people miss that part. And then like kink community. So I work with alternative sexualities and relationship styles. And those are kind of my big ones, but I have a few others that I work with, but those are my big ones.
Okay, this is going to give us plenty of fuel for the fodder. We're going to be able to dig into this. I started this podcast to try to bring men and women back together because
Yeah.
I feel like society has done something to us and it keeps going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So that is my whole passion, and that's why I started this because I just feel like there's this off thing, and all through nature it seems like feminine, masculine energy interconnect.
Yeah.
It seems like we're going against our nature.
Absolutely. So if you think about it like, you familiar with the yin yang symbol?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay. So the idea with it is balance between opposing forces,
Okay.
right? And within the light side, there's a little dot of dark, and within the dark side, there's a little dot of light,
Yes.
which kind of means that within each of us, like if I'm the feminine side, there's still some masculine in me.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have to find that balance. But then between me and my partner, I also need to find the balance there. So we kind of have to find the balance in multiple areas. And that masculine feminine thing is everywhere. I even work with this in with same sex couples, where they're kind of going, wait a minute, that's weird. And I'm like, no, hang on. But yeah, we are so well, first of all, healthy masculinity has been vilified
Yes. Yes.
in our culture. And that makes me really sad because when you see someone with healthy masculinity, they're present, they're attuned, they're comfortable with themselves, and there's nothing toxic about it if they're being healthy. And that right there is where people get hung up because they're passing their own judgments and putting their own values on it, which have come from culture and society.
Yeah, I actually I had this thought the other day where men are sort of being treated like dysfunctional women instead of
Yes.
men that need to evolve and figure out our
Yeah.
emotional outlet and therapy and all that. We're more being treated like dysfunctional women.
Right. There's a woman who wrote some books. She's a researcher. I believe she's the PhD in psychology, but she decided she was going to set out to research how men think and operate.
Okay.
And she's like, oh, this will be easy. I'll be done in like a year. 20 years later, she's still doing it because she's realizing she had it all wrong. And she says, her name is Allison Armstrong, if you want to look her up, by the way. But
Yeah. Let me write that down.
even she says, men are not hairy women, you know, and women are not men with boobs. We are very different. But when we figure out that polarity, when we figure out how to accept the other person for being who they're being, because hormones and life stage and all kinds of things play a role in both sexes
Okay.
and how they present through the lifespan.
Okay. That's
And
interesting. Go ahead. Keep going. I want to cut you
yeah,
off.
so it's my husband and I, we met 5 years ago,
Okay.
and now I'm going through perimenopause.
Okay.
And he's kind of going through some of his own changes. And, we're both focusing on health and, we're even doing hormone replacement just to kind of make sure that we don't lose that ability to connect on the level that we want to connect on. But it changes the way that you think and approach life
Okay.
in both genders. I mean, we literally have, so you would have hormonal changes that someday make you a grandpa, that more doting, softer, version of you.
Yeah. I
So,
so I heard as we get older, um, women tend to get more hard and men tend to get more soft
yeah,
because of our hormones.
yes,
So
yes.
that's what you and your husband are kind of trying to compensate for with the hormone therapy.
But balance, yeah, we're
Okay.
trying to keep that balance because, oh my god, perimenopause is a roller coaster, and I've seen this look cross his face a couple of times when I'd have a mood swing where I tried really hard to manage it and approach things in a healthy way, but I could see this look cross his face like, "Well, frickin' heck, now here we go again," Sorry, I don't know if we can cuss on here, but,
No, we can
I
cuss.
almost
No,
did.
I cuss all the time. I suck at cussing, so
Perfect.
yeah.
The look said, "Well, fuck, here we go again." But he was very patient about it, and we talk things out. But um yeah, so what happens in women is the estrogen, when the estrogen starts dropping, that is the hormone that actually gives us that caretaking, nurturing side. So when it starts dropping, um mid to early 40s, it's kind of a crapshoot on that. But, when it starts dropping, we kinda start going, "Wait a minute, why am I taking care of everybody but me?"
Okay. So
And so, recognizing that you can still take care of you and other people, be kind, you know? But some women get really hard about it,
okay.
and that's not healthy. So,
So what age range of the people that you work with the most? What are the age range, do you think?
ooh, I would say most of the people I work with are in their 30s, but I have had people, I've worked with children on the neurodivergence, and I've also worked with people up to about 70, I think.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
do you mainly work with women, men? What do you who do you think
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay.
Um,
I'm gonna do that probably 100 times during this conversation. Who do you
I
think
kind
comes
of
into
think
your
it's a family trait, honestly.
Yeah,
Um, so wow, shit, what was the question? Damn it.
who do you think comes into your office the most, men or women? Who do you work with?
Definitely women.
Okay.
But I do see some men.
Okay.
Sometimes I tell them, you might be better served by speaking with a man who understands this, because sometimes what they're looking for is female validation.
Okay.
And so there are times it's very appropriate for me to refer out.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. Okay,
so,
I heard 85, I think I read a stat the other day that 85% of mental health counselors are women.
yes, that
So
is true.
it's mainly a woman field and kind of
Mhm.
and I have a feeling, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, rightly or wrongly, I've got a feeling that a lot of it doesn't that men don't get a lot of help
Yeah.
through the conventional mental health model because it was
Yes.
kind of modeled for women. There was Freud. There's a lady called Annie O. That was her name, and I think
Hmm.
she was hallucinating and she had a whole host of problems. I don't quote me exactly on this, but he was talking during the therapy session, and she said, "Will you just shut up and let me talk?" So he let her talk for an hour. And she said, "I feel so much better."
Yeah.
So that was kind of how the psychoanalytic uh, model started right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very true. I have a couple of people that I have talked to where um they call okay, I might need to give background on that one.
Okay.
Um Google, the programmers, if they're having a hard time figuring out where they're wrong in the code and trying to fix the code, they have like these rubber ducks that sit on top of their computers and they talk it through to the rubber duck.
Okay.
Okay, that way they're not like constantly bugging colleagues and stuff like that, and it's not taking two people to do a one person job. Sometimes it really works well. And I have likened myself to a rubber duck for some people, because all some people need is to be able to talk it out and make sense of their thoughts.
Yeah.
You can do similar things through journaling. I know a couple of people who use Chat GPT to kind of get to distill their thoughts down
Okay. Okay.
and
That.
start making sense of it.
Yeah.
But you're right. Men don't men tend to be underserved in the mental health world.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's because women run the show and they're trying to make them just hairy women.
Yeah. And I feel like men somewhat are solution based.
Yes, that is very true.
So like I
Um,
never I have never just smelled it. Like I journal every night. I think I've been journaling for the last 5 months. And it looks more like
uh-huh.
a captain's log. Like captain's log day
Okay.
number 90.
Yeah.
Just laughing I don't know what I'm getting out of it, but it's a little venting, I guess, process for me. But um uh, like I feel like men are a little more solution based.
Yeah.
And so we would rather someone say, "Hey, do this,"
Right.
or do this, and then we'll be like, "Okay, we're good."
Right. No, that's very true. So men tend to have a better ability to just make that change,
Yeah.
where women have to think it through and it's got to become a part of us. And it's like, it takes us months to
Yeah.
make that change. It's got to be congruous with how we're thinking about stuff.
And I think there's a disconnect between men and women when we talk to each other sometimes too,
Yes,
right? So like
absolutely.
we want to fix it. We're like, what are you doing? You just told me this. This is what you do. And a woman needs to process it and run it through and use
Yeah.
you as a sounding board. And she's gonna figure it out herself. It just takes a lot longer.
Yes, absolutely. So when I talk to couples about that, I recommend that that she approaches him if she needs to vent, she approaches him with, "Hey, do you have a little emotional space for my crap right now?"
Okay.
And like, I'm not looking for a solution, I just need to vent.
Okay.
Let him know that, right? And then for him, I try to tell him, okay, don't offer solutions unless she either asks or you ask if it's okay. Okay. But I also let women know that vasopressin is released when men start working collaboratively to solve a problem.
Okay.
Vasopressin is the male bonding hormone,
Okay.
and it's also responsible for erections.
Okay. So it may be an evolutionary trait that
Yeah.
we carry with us. I know I have been trying to practice. So I talk to women regularly and I've tried to develop some women friendships as
Yeah.
kind of a low cost way to
Hmm.
interact with women and learn to and I still just I'm like, what are you doing? Do this, do this, do this. And I can't help myself. Like even while I'm thinking, she just wants to talk. I'm sitting here
Yeah.
like dogging myself because I can't just let her talk. So that's something
Yeah.
I've been trying to work on.
It is hard. I get it. So my internship supervisor, because I used to be very solution focused, which is where I was leaning too hard into my masculine.
Okay.
And my internship supervisor used to say, Melanie, you've got to stop thinking like a man. Stop it. So he would call me out for it all the time. And so I actually get kind of where you're coming from. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard to make that adjustment, but we're trying to get both of you to come together and it can't be one-sided, right? Like I have to come, his way, he's got to come my way. And,
Yeah.
that's where we find the balance and polarity.
Yeah, I think there's this old country song called Meet by the Old Oak Tree, where there's an oak
Okay.
tree in the backyard, and anytime there was a disagreement or they started fighting too bad, they had to go out and meet by the old oak tree. And it was kind of a
Okay.
yeah, it was that's
It's bringing to mind Meet in the Middle by Diamond Rio, maybe?
Okay, maybe that too. Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. It has stuck with me for literally
Yeah.
30 years, 20, 30 years. And I
Yeah.
always freaking think about it. Like that's kind of a good model. So
Yeah.
what do you think? What are I don't like to call them problems because we all have stuff inside us. So I
Yeah.
don't want to say what are the biggest problems people have. I would like to maybe reframe it as what do people deal with the most? They come to you. What are they looking to deal with in a romantic?
Yeah. Okay, so honestly, most of the time, people are coming in. I've kind of got two things. They're coming in because they don't understand how to relate to each other, and they're going, "Okay, wait a minute, we've both changed." Um, because I get more midlife to later life couples kind of going, "We have both changed. I don't know what's going on anymore. I don't know how to relate to my partner." And so just kind of communication and being able to relate to each other. And then there's the couples that come in for sex therapy that kind of are going, okay, what's going on? Because, I've either got this hang up or how do we incorporate this into our lives in a healthy way?
Okay.
That kind of thing.
And that's where the kink and the BDSM community, that's where that specialty kind of comes in.
Yes.
Okay. How,
Yeah.
how important do you think, how important, all right, I was trying to frame this question last night because it's been going, like all this goes through my head. I don't write a lot of notes, but I'll stay
Yeah.
up all night trying to sleep while stuff kind of cycles through my head. How important do you think that is in a relationship? That sort of finding each other in that way, or what? Okay, let's backtrack because I get a lot of men. There's this thing called the Madonna horror complex
Okay. Yep.
where they don't want men are shy to express their needs to their woman, or they're
Mhm.
respecting her too much, something like that. How do you see a way past that? Like how like if a guy was to come in and
Mhm.
say, I'm having like a lot of guys that go to prostitutes and they'll
Yep.
come home and they'll make love to their wife and then they go to a prostitute for the dirty stuff. How would you how would you help a guy or a woman or maybe both do a guy and then a woman because it's gonna take both.
Yeah.
How do you how do you work someone through that sort of
So a lot of times,
thing?
so
Be a
this
little-
is putting me in mind of when my son was young. And so I adopted a boy when he was 9 years old. And
okay,
he came in with a whole lot of, awkwardness and kind of like shame and stuff like that. And if anything around the word sex came up when he was a little bit older, of course,
yeah,
he would like freak out.
okay.
So I would start randomly yelling the word sex just to just to kind of like give him exposure therapy, and he eventually started to relax and he's like, okay, you can stop now, that's fine. But it's almost an exposure therapy. It's like trying to get them to first be comfortable with themselves,
Okay,
because sometimes it's coming from shame from their past,
okay,
what culture has told them
okay,
that, this is not okay, you have to be super gentle and you have to be, like all about this uber this is going to be a dangerous way to say it, but
okay.
super levels of respect, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's yeah. I actually posted something like
But
that the other day. Didn't get a lot of love on it. So go ahead.
yeah. So, but the thing is, in the kink world and the BDSM world, it is about respect. It's about respect and consent and communication.
Yeah,
Now, I'm not trying to like shift people over into that world, but I am trying to get them to be comfortable with themselves enough to be able to talk about sex
yeah,
with their partners.
yeah.
And, sometimes we talk about, okay, you can try this, try approaching this way, soft entries into, maybe they want to start using toys.
Yeah.
And so, like I had one person approach me one time and ask about the Hitachi magic wand. And it's it is a powerful external vibrator and it's really big, but it's
Oh,
external.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, if you've never used toys before, do not start with that one with her. That's not, you want something like a finger vibrator that you can maintain the personal touch and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
So we kind of like think about where they are, what's appropriate to recommend, but we've got to get past that shame and that discomfort with self first.
Okay. I came up with this thing. I think I woke up like 2 in the morning because I go through these phases where I focus on something. I'm like, oh, this is logical, this is logical. And I came up with this thing where, and I posted this online, and it did not get any love at all. But it was, yeah, it's kind of polarizing. But it was, women need to stop expecting men to respect them at the expense of their sexual objectification of them, and men
Okay.
need to learn how to compartmentalize the two.
Okay. All right. So where did that thought come from?
I have no idea.
Tell me more.
I don't know. I've been thinking. I always think about interpersonal relationship
Yeah.
dynamics, and I think I was listening to a podcast the other day that was
Okay.
talking about the Madonna horror complex and how men are we were and that's not saying don't open the door for her, don't do that. But a woman has never been turned on by you opening the door. Now
Right.
there's a direct line between don't open the door for her and don't punch her in the face. So I
Right.
believe chivalry is a very good thing, right? I don't think we
Yes.
should ever get rid of that. But so it was just I don't know what it was. It just turning in my brain while I was asleep, and I woke up and I wrote it down because I was proud of myself for
Yeah.
coming up with a little.
Yeah.
So
So what Justin Lemiller, he is a sex therapist, I think in West Virginia. I'm trying to remember where he is. I don't even remember where he is, but he's written some books and he's got a podcast.
okay,
And he, one of the findings that he did in some of his research is the number one thing that turns a woman on is to be desired.
yeah, yeah,
But if she feels like she's not a personal part of that, right? Like if she feels like, okay, I'm just a pair of boobs and a butt, that doesn't do it. But to be desired in a way that makes her feel like a person. And so there's a fine line to walk there because objectification
yeah,
is fine for some women. They're like, okay,
yeah,
that's fine. But a lot of it has to do with the trust and the relationship. So, like early on, objectification, not so much. A little bit later, not that big a deal as long as you've built
yeah,
that baseline of trust and comfort.
yeah, and
You know?
the emotional connection and all that and everything.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I will look up that guy and maybe look at some of his podcasts because
I will send you all the resources you want.
I appreciate that absolutely. Okay, so all right, so we covered that, and you work mainly with couples or men or women.
Mainly with women.
Okay,
Couples are starting to drop off a little bit, mainly with women, a few men,
okay,
but I do work with couples and polycules.
okay. What got you into this?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that because, like, what got me into this? Um,
Even if it's a long, winding road, we have time.
okay, fair. So we have this common understanding in my field that we went into it either to figure ourselves out or a family member out.
Okay, okay,
And for me, it was both. So I started there, and I knew that in my I discovered as I started working with couples, I discovered I'm being a hypocrite because I'm not living a lot of the stuff that I am saying because I'm excusing my partner for a lot of things.
that makes sense.
And that eventually led to a divorce.
Okay,
Um, Somewhere in that time frame, I had someone who was seeking a therapist who would work with a BDSM arrangement.
okay,
And I'm like, okay, let me check on a few things and I'll get back with you. And I'd kind of always been fascinated with the psychology of that.
okay,
And so I did a little research and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I can totally do this. And so that was kind of my entry point.
okay,
It was something that I had kind of explored in my life a little bit.
okay,
And and then I met my husband who does very similar work to me.
okay,
And he talks to men about relationships and sex and we are actually very out as far as being part of that community ourselves.
Yeah.
In fact, I got an invitation to present at a convention in September, so I've got to get that class material ready.
That's pretty
But
cool. That's actually pretty cool.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
kind of excited, but I also don't know a lot about the organization yet, so I'm trying to vet them a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just kind of this natural progression from trying to figure myself and my family out,
Yeah.
and
I understand the feeling.
we're on the same wavelength there. And um and then, just kind of my life in stages, and finally being free to explore that part of me led to me going, you know what, there's a whole lot of people that feel stigmatized
Yeah.
or have a hard time figuring out how to be healthy with it.
Yeah. And I realized I thought of something a while back because I've dabbled in that stuff too in relationships. And there are a lot of people that go into that sort of thing single as like just as that's all it is, a sex thing. But I feel personally that if there's not an emotional connection,
Yeah,
it could get abusive real quick. Like if you don't care
frequently.
about the person, like I won't ever dabble in anything like that unless I love someone. So if
Yeah.
there's that emotional connection or something like that, because I just feel like without that, it could get really abusive.
Yeah. In fact, in the early stages of my husband's really mine and my husband's relationship, um, we didn't get to any of that stuff for several months. It was something like 6 months in before we got anywhere close to that, even though we both knew that's where we wanted to go because it was part of our lives before. Um, because it does take time to vet the other person,
Yeah,
make sure that you feel safe, build that trust, and learn to communicate around it.
yeah,
And even now, every so often, we will do kind of I don't know if you've ever seen, there's like a yes, no, maybe checklist.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
like a bunch of them. Yeah. And so even now, every so often, we'll kind of check in with where have things evolved? Is there something new you want to kind of explore?
yeah.
Am I on the same page? So we'll do that every once in a while too.
Yeah, that's
Still.
good. That's like a really healthy way to do that, so you guys don't get kind of lost or on your own thing. Yeah, that's
Right.
so. Let's pull off the romantic
Sure.
things for a minute, or I will go down. Like I will spend 3 hours
Totally
talking
fair.
down there. Neurodivergence.
Yeah.
What now? Can you explain exactly what that entails? Maybe kind of just
So
the basics.
it's a different way that your brain is wired. It might be neurodevelopmental, or it might be something that kind of came on through um, socialization within your family.
Okay.
Usually the groundwork is going to be laid in your childhood somehow, if it's not a neurodevelopmental that you're born with. So ADHD and autism are a part of that. I have ADHD. My brother has autism and ADHD. And um, we think about the world differently.
Yeah.
We approach it differently. I tend to work with a lot of women who were late diagnosed autistic or ADHD.
Okay.
So they weren't usually the common understanding a while back was that had to be diagnosed in childhood. But now we're finding that there's a lot of people, particularly women, because we present differently than men do
Okay.
in that area, that were missed,
Okay.
in childhood. And so, like, I get a lot of women coming to me going, why can't I relate to people the way that they seem to want me to?
Yeah.
And that's part of that. Interestingly enough, neurodivergence is highly correlated with kink, as an aside.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
I got diagnosed with ADHD as a kid.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I was on medication all through my teens. But
Yeah.
I decided as an adult, I kind of got control of it to an extent. And then I
Yeah.
lost my leg and I went through this traumatic,
Ooh.
and it kind of freaking reset me in
Yeah.
some weird way to where I had lost control of that for a minute. And
Yeah.
some,
No, when you go through an exceptionally difficult time in your life, it can absolutely reset you because the stress hormones and
Yeah.
the dopamine's just not hanging out as long as it should. I am not medicated either. I tried medication for a brief period of time, and it was interesting because even my kid, my husband, they could tell the difference on days that I took it and didn't take it. But there's a lot of natural, excuse me, I've got the hiccups now.
That's okay.
There's a lot of natural ways to regulate and get it. And I figured also I wasn't diagnosed till I was like 41, 42.
Okay.
And I'm like, you know what? I've managed it this long. I can probably go back to no medication. And so
You seem
that's
to
what
be
I did.
you seem to be very successful. You seem to be doing it great. So
I'm glad I bluff you good enough. No, no, I love my life. I absolutely love my life. So neurodivergence basically is ADHD, autism, borderline personality disorder is sometimes lumped in there as part of it. Um, and it's just a different wiring and a different way of thinking about the world. So
and,
trying to help them fit in with the neurotypical people.
and it's more of a nature thing than a nurture thing.
Most of the time, ADHD and autism are more nature, although sometimes it can be nurture. That's a whole complex thing to go into. But borderline personality disorder is more of a nurture thing.
Okay. I've What are the traits of what are the general traits of borderline personality disorder? Because
So you're looking at someone who has a very unstable sense of themselves,
okay,
who makes desperate attempts to avoid abandonment. I'm trying to remember the criteria off the top of my head. Those are two big ones.
okay,
Um, there's a very black and white way of thinking about things. You look at someone who, tends to idealize people in their lives until that person breathes wrong, and then they're just off that pedestal and worthless.
okay, and that probably comes through a lot in romantic relationships too.
It does. Because a lot of times a borderline personality person will get with someone who is very emotionally unavailable,
Okay,
and it creates this big firestorm that's not pretty.
okay. Have you ever dug into the attachment styles?
Yes.
I am eternally fascinated with attachment styles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I tend to be sort of anxious.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that tends, which is kind of fucking. It's kind of. I've talked to a lot of guys, and they don't like to admit that. Like they
Yeah.
want to be tough and be like, oh no, I'm a,
Right.
and but yeah, I tend to be kind of anxious, so I'm really curious about the attachment styles and what maybe you pick your
Yeah.
brain a little bit about it. What do you know about
Oh my gosh. That was a huge thing that we studied in grad school, actually. So, yeah, attachment styles. So one thing to note is that attachment styles can be changed.
it? Okay,
You have your primary attachment style, but it's um it responds to your primary attachment in your life. If you are with someone who is very healthily attached, very securely attached, that can shift your style some because you start to see, okay, they're secure, I can be secure too. But it starts out with your parents, and you may default back to that baseline at some point when things are really stressful or something like that. But it starts with your parents, and so the way that that starts out is so you look at when you're a child, you look at your parents as they are the secure base
okay,
from which you explore the world.
sort of your primary relationship type.
Yes. Yeah. And it's going to be influenced by the primary caregiver more than the secondary caregiver.
Okay, okay,
Okay. And if they are responsive to your needs, you learn I can ask for what I need. I can ask for what I want, and they're going to supply what I need. Um, but if they don't respond or they respond inconsistently, that changes your thinking.
okay,
And you start to go, oh, it's not safe to ask,
okay,
or they're not there for me. I can only rely on myself.
okay.
And this is how it shapes the different ways that we think about attachment in romantic relationships later.
So one person may go, okay, I need to work harder for this, for my caregiver, for her attention, and one person may say, hey, I don't need her. Like
Yeah.
what's the difference between? Do you know the difference between the people that would lean one way or another?
Um, that's a good question. I would at one time have said, yeah, I can give you examples, but now I'm kind of going, all right, it's a little more unexpected. It's not quite the way that I would have initially thought. But so if your parent completely ignores you, you might shut down emotionally and just go, I don't need you attached to anybody.
Okay.
Another general example might be if they're inconsistent. Sometimes they meet that need. Sometimes your asking is met with anger
Okay.
or indifference. So that goes into intermittent reinforcement, which is part of Pavlov's stuff. Um, but intermittent reinforcement tends to make you try harder.
Yeah.
So that might make you a little more anxious and a little more, but that might split off into anxious avoidant where you waffle between being anxious and shutting people out.
Yeah, which I read that is the most difficult attachment
Yes.
style to kind of deal with because you're kind of all over
Yes.
the place. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And definitely from the clinician's side, it's difficult to work with there too.
So do you think so what advice would you give somebody if they're dealing with an ancient anxious attachment style versus a what is the other one called? I'm sorry.
So you've got avoidant
Avoid.
and anxious and secure.
Okay, so what advice would you give somebody dealing with an anxious one, them, and what advice would you give their partner?
Okay, so anxious. If you're dealing with an anxious attachment style, I recommend very much that you learn to communicate about where your anxieties are, but not in a way that is, hey, fix this for me.
Yeah.
It's, I am feeling anxious about this and I could use a hug. Now, a 30-second hug releases a whole lot of oxytocin, which is one of the bonding hormones,
Yeah.
and that can go a long way.
Okay.
I recommend that you look for um, the little cues in your relationship that show that you are safe.
Okay.
What are the things that you've noticed that say that they're there? They're not going anywhere,
So
right?
kind of talk yourself through it too, and
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe recognize some of your triggers.
Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, there have been times like my husband was talking to some friends one night, and we left. On the drive home, he says, "I hope I didn't overshare anything." And I'm like, you know what? I need to sit with it for about 24 hours because there was something that kind of triggered me. But then I realized I'm like, I don't know if I need to talk to you about it yet. I need to sit with it.
Yeah.
So by the next morning, I'm like, you know what? It wasn't something he did wrong. It was something that my mom used to do
Okay.
that triggered me. And I'm like, it just reminded me of that. He didn't actually do anything.
So the emotional intelligence part really plays a big role in it.
It does. And you can increase that. You can learn some of that. Now for the partner
Yeah.
of the person who has anxious attachment, consistency and reassurance.
Okay.
Those are two big factors.
Okay. And so what advice would you give if somebody had was on the other side of that?
Avoidant?
Yes. I keep forgetting
Okay.
that word. So
No, 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 that's okay. I just wanted to make sure we were on the
yeah.
same page. Because I'll tell you, I go through when I talk to people about the stages of grief, I forget one every time, and I've been doing it for years. Um, so for an avoidant, someone who is the partner of an avoidant, um, don't chase them.
Okay.
Give them that space when they need to have some space.
Okay.
because the neediness is a huge turnoff for most of them. And that tends to spur them to keep running further away.
Okay. That
Okay. Having that kind of space and balance will allow them to soften a little bit into a more secure attachment.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like sometimes we get caught in a dance to
Yes.
where anxious people are drawn to avoidant people, and avoidant
Yes.
people are drawn to anxious people, and it can really wreck your relationship because you're going
Yes.
back and forth, and it's just I've been in that. I was in a relationship like that before, and it just
Uh-huh.
wrecked my world. I was an anxious guy, she was avoidant, and it wrecked both of our worlds. I'm sure of it. So I feel like sometimes we can get kind of caught in a dance, and I don't know if there's a
Yeah.
way out of that dance. I have not found a way out of that dance.
Ooh, there is, but it requires you to learn about your partner's style and be willing to accommodate that. And I have handouts that I give to people. Um, these are the specific things that are likely to trigger this type of attachment. This is what you do, this is what you don't do if you have a partner who is this type of attachment. And I give those to people and just kind of, ask them to reflect on it and like, what do you do that's in this category that might trigger? And what do you do, that's in this category that might be reassuring, and kind of get them to think about that a little bit.
So
So,
they have to stop, get off the dance floor, and kind of just
yeah,
pull themselves together and work together on it in some way.
right. Absolutely. But also there's this fine line between, you being considerate of your partner's childhood traumas and triggers versus trying to fix it for them, because you cannot fix it for them,
Okay.
but you can show up with consistency and care.
Okay.
And it's really for them to fix.
Okay. Okay. And so all right, let's switch gears for a minute. You also help people get over toxic relationships.
Yes, I do.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
That is,
A lot of times,
I've gone
a
down
lot of
the rabbit
times,
hole. Yeah.
I know. I know. I've kind of watched some stuff over the years and kind of gone, oh my God. Um, so a lot of times it is someone who has some kind of personality disorder that was the toxic partner.
Okay.
Um, and I've worked with a lot of people who were with a narcissistic partner, and they're now co-parenting and trying to figure out, how do I do this without letting them run my life anymore or trigger me or,
Okay.
whatever. And a lot of it has to do with boundaries and figuring out how to set solid boundaries and
Okay.
how to um, communicate them in a way that they're more likely to be respected, and how to respond if they're not respected. So there's that aspect of it, which is taking back control of your own life. And then there's also the pain associated with the things that they did while in relationship. And maybe sometimes there's guilt on the part of the other partner where they're like, I feel like I was the abusive one. A lot of times that's because your toxic partner told you that that was the case.
Yeah.
And also, there is a thing called reactive abuse, where the toxic partner is poking and prodding, and they know those buttons to push that might bring that type of behavior out
That makes
in the healthier partner. I'm saying healthier because we're never 100% healthy, especially in that kind of relationship.
yeah.
Um, and that healthier partner might lash out in some way and become abusive in their own way.
Okay.
And it becomes this nasty cycle.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What advice would you give someone? All right, so what steps, let's say somebody got out of an abusive relationship. Let's say they don't have kids together. Let's say
Okay.
they were in this relationship way too long, which is easy to do when you're in an abusive
Yep.
relationship because it's kind of like playing a slot machine sometimes. Sometimes
Yep.
it gets addictive to your brain.
And that's that intermittent reinforcement, which makes you try harder.
Yeah, people gamble all the time and you get stuck in one of those relationships and you just keep pulling that lever.
Yeah.
Every once in a while when you win, you get that rush. So
Yep.
So, all right, let's backtrack. How would you help somebody get out of that sort of situation?
So the hard part for me is I can't tell them to leave.
Yeah.
I can show them like the power control cycle and what that looks like and see if they recognize that.
Okay.
You know, educate on boundaries. That's a big piece of it. If they're in it, educate them on boundaries and how to set them. And eventually they start to recognize, oh, this person is not respecting this. They're not listening at all.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't good for me.
Okay.
And so a lot of it is about education.
Okay. So, what advice would you give somebody who has made it out of that situation? But what advice would you give them to kind of learn to start over? Is it possible
Mm,
for somebody to I personally, rightly or wrongly, again, I read this book called Your Brain on Love, which is kind of
okay.
a neurobiological and psychological look at relationships and making them last and all this. Do you feel like it is possible to heal completely all by yourself, all on your own, single, from what happened to you in a previous relationship?
So what I'm about to say is probably going to be somewhat controversial because people always say, "Oh, you have to be healed before you can be in a relationship."
Y-
But there are some things that you are not going to know are there until you're in another relationship.
Yes.
And something happens that triggers that.
Yeah.
I I do this for a living.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks ago, what was it? One, two. Yeah, it was 2 to 3 weeks ago. I got triggered by something so hard that I cried for like 5 days. And I'm like, I had no idea that was there. And it was from childhood into my last marriage. And my last marriage was 25 years long.
Okay.
So it was just something that was basically my entire life, but it was so deep.
Yeah. It's
And I
ingrained.
thought that I had shaken it, but I didn't know it was there and that deep.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we heal at the level we're capable of at any given time.
Okay.
What our life circumstances allow, what our level of having met ourselves allow, what our relationship status allows.
Okay.
And once we've moved past that stage, we might have to revisit some of that stuff to heal it on a different level or a different facet of it.
Okay.
Um, and so 100% no. There's gonna be scars, and sometimes those scars will hurt.
Yeah. I see always these people saying that, oh, well, I'm completely healed and I need,
Mhm.
and they feel like, see, I likened it to if I got jumped in an alley
Yeah.
and I kept getting jumped in the alley for a couple years, and then I cannot, and then I can sit in my living room and say, hey, you know what? I feel good. I'm healed up. I'm not, nothing. I don't have any byproducts of that. But the second I walk into an alley, something's going to come
Mhm.
up. I'm going to get nervous about getting hurt again.
Right. No,
So,
that's absolutely true. So you either avoid the alley altogether
yeah,
or learn how to protect yourself. But then if you meet someone in an alley who's actually a kind person that you wanna walk through that alley with,
yeah,
you gotta figure out how to let down those defenses.
yeah, yeah. And that's very hard to do.
It is. It really is.
Yeah,
And that has been honestly, I'll be really honest, that has been a huge part of my journey
yeah,
after divorcing my ex and then meeting my current husband, is figuring out how to trust things again when so much of what happened in my last marriage was so deep and cut so deep. My husband currently, he is so understanding and emotionally intelligent.
okay.
He recognizes, and here we're going back to polarity, but
Yeah,
he recognizes that the feminine is ruled by emotion,
yeah,
right? And he recognizes there are going to be times he does not understand what the hell's going on,
yeah,
but he can be there for me in a safe and consistent way. And that doesn't mean that I let it rule me.
yeah,
That doesn't mean that I let it rule my relationship or damage my current relationship. I have to be aware enough to know, ooh, That's something that I need to work on, and maybe I let him know what's going on so that he is aware and doesn't take it personally,
Okay.
but knows that I am working on it and I'm aware of it. Does
So
that make sense?
yeah, that does. So what I'm hearing is if you get into a new relationship and some of that old trauma presents itself, you have to
Mhm.
be able to recognize that trauma and then convey it in a appropriate way to your partner. Because I feel like your
Yes.
partner could then react to whatever you're reacting to, and you guys can feed off each other.
Yeah.
So it just kind of explain to your partner what's going on, and then you guys work through it. That
Yes.
that obviously
Absolutely.
takes place. Yeah. Okay. That's how did you meet your husband?
Tinder.
All right. Okay.
Now, I will say that's a crapshoot and it's a toxic place, but we were both just looking for friends with benefits. You
Okay.
know, he was supposed to be my second, I was supposed to be his third, and we met and we kind of go, whoa, let's slow the roll because
Yeah.
there's something a little more here. And I want to get to know you, not just have fun.
Okay.
And so we slowed the roll, and here we are 5 years later.
Yeah. That's I have a love hate relationship with dating apps.
Yeah.
So it's obviously the way society's going. Like there's no
Uh-huh.
avoiding them. But I feel like if I am given someone had this famous quote about jam, and they were like, if someone presented you 20 jars of jam, you would have a hard time picking what you'd
Yeah.
have a hard time picking a jar of jam. But if you got three jars of jam,
Yeah.
you would enjoy that jam more, and you wouldn't have the
Yeah.
guilt of that.
And also, what happens when one of those jams goes bad?
Yeah,
Easier to toss it out because you've got other options,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah. That makes see.
And
That's another thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, my husband tells men that he works with sometimes, um, don't be on the dating apps all the time. Like check it once a week or once every 2 weeks. That's it.
It gets addictive.
Because otherwise you get that weird dopamine rush that, and the addictive quality to it, and you're overwhelmed with choices maybe, or, something along those lines.
And it's far too easy to just scroll through people if something bad is going on in a relationship. If you could,
Absolutely.
I mean, you guys could just have a misunderstanding or a disillusionment on anything instead of working through it. It's so easy to just grab your phone and just
Yeah.
go on to the next menu item. So I've got such a love. I don't know how I feel about it right now. It's
I totally get it. I mean, they're they all have a little bit of a different flavor, each one from the other. But there's an awful lot of relationships right now that have started that way.
yeah,
But you've got to have the good boundaries in place. Dennis and I, like I said, we were not even supposed to be primary friends with benefits for each other. And we kind of both went, you know what? I'm going to focus my attention here because there's something here.
so what does your husband do exactly? Let's talk about your husband for a minute.
Yeah, so he's a men's relationship coach.
He's got a YouTube
And
channel, right?
well, I'm sorry.
He has a YouTube channel, right?
He does. He has a YouTube channel, Man of Legacy.
Okay.
And yeah, he talks about all kinds of different things with relationships. A lot of the men he works with are midlife and either going through a divorce or potentially heading that direction. And so he works with them to try to help them find that calm, grounded masculinity again, and navigate whatever is coming their way, possibly turn the ship around. Because sometimes when you find that grounded masculinity, it does turn the relationship around.
Yeah,
And that was always a frustrating thing to me, is that, well, men set the tone for the relationship. So what can I do?
yeah,
Well, I can be soft and I can be feminine and I can lean into that. Um, I can lean into that with boundaries.
yeah. I
And so that's what I can do.
I've got I've got this thing where I think everything if we get men to have healthy emotional outlets and to get their
Yeah,
mental health in check, downstream from that are happier women. So it's
absolutely.
sort of
Men
like
do not have enough guy time.
Yeah.
They don't have enough healthy relationships with other men.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I'm sorry, my nose itches because allergies are a thing right now.
It's okay.
Um, but that's where my husband is right now. He's in Spain
Okay.
and he's walking across the country on the Camino de Santiago. And so he will be there for the next 5 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and so those are I think I saw you like seeing some of those pictures. You
Yeah.
reacted to some of the pictures on his thing.
Good.
Um, but he's running a retreat. He's doing it with his buddy Charlie.
Okay.
Okay. They planned this before he met me for his 60th birthday.
Okay.
Okay. So this is his 60th birthday present to himself. And so he's doing it with his friend Charlie and he's walking the entire way. But then parts of the way, they're going to have some of the men from the community that he created come in and join them
Okay.
and walk part of the way with them. And so that's, it's a retreat. They're going to talk about important stuff and kind of have some of that masculine, camaraderie.
Yeah. So that's like the man thing. Get out,
Yeah.
work your body, get together and accomplish
Yes.
something. Australia did this interesting study called the Shed Initiative.
Okay.
So they studied when women talk to each other, their knees point at each other.
Mm-hmm.
They vent and they get real good communication. When men talk to each other, their knees point away from each other. So they
Yep.
built a shed and put a broke down lawnmower in the middle of it. And
Okay.
threw like 5 or 6 men in there and said, fix the lawnmower. So they're sitting there and they're looking at the lawnmower and they're kind of, hey, hand me that wrench. And then before you know it, 20 minutes later, they're all venting to each other. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this. It's just a different. I think men just need a different approach.
Yeah. Absolutely. That men tend to bond with each other when they are working collaboratively
Yep. Yeah.
on some kind of problem, fixing the problem. Yeah.
So I hope to get to know your husband, and I hope to
Yeah.
pull him onto a podcast someday because I would love to dig into that, and I'd love to dig into what he does because it seems like what he's doing is exactly what men need.
Yeah.
Which he understands it really well, and I think when men flounder, women suffer the most. So I think that's just
I would, yeah.
kind of just the way it is. So I
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, men set the tone for the relationship and women respond.
yeah, and
Mhm.
I think we all need to just work together on that. I think men and women need to work together. I think men and
Yeah.
men need to work together more because we have
Yeah.
a very hard time doing that. And like,
And women need to reconnect with the feminine, to be honest, you
yeah,
know?
I
And
try
I'm
to
running a retreat in Mexico in January that is all about that,
see.
you
I
know?
try to
It's like,
avoid saying that so much because I'm a guy, and
yeah,
it's not taken really well. But
but I had to throw it in there because,
yeah, I'm very glad you did. So yeah, this I enjoyed this. I have to rush off to work at 9 in my time.
all
So
right.
I really enjoyed this, and I would like to probably revisit this at some point
Yeah,
because I think
I'd
I've
love to.
missed a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about. So this is going to be my best podcast to date.
Awesome. Yay. Well, you're welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much, and yeah, I hope to talk to your husband. I'm going to start trying to reach out to him more.
All right. Sounds good. Well,
Okay.
you head off for work and I'm going to go make some coffee.
Well, you enjoy your coffee and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right. You too.